All right, we have spoken about conference realignment a ton on this channel, and we're not stopping anytime soon. I have Brian from Clemson Football Live on today, man. Thank you for joining me. Clemson's gone about this a little bit differently than FSU has, but man, they fired a massive shot at the ACC. Just came out about a week ago saying that the ACC had diminished the value of the Clemson brand. They've injured Clemson and impeded its ability to negotiate future media rights agreements, and they worsened their negotiating position with other potential future collaborators, other conferences. Clemson fans pretty happy that the Tigers are going a little harder at the ACC right now.
Well, first, thanks for having me on the show. It's a lot of fun. And to answer your question, yes, we are happy that they are taking off the gloves and they're grabbing whatever they can to swing at the ACC. Growing up, I had a family member who told me one time, said, "You know the only rule in fighting?" And I was like, "No, I don't know the only rule in fighting." They said the only rule is there are no rules. Clemson started off as kind of the nice guy in this one, right? Then they saw that the ACC was as bad as Florida State has painted them out to be. So Clemson has really went after them. They have said what you said. It was a lot of legal jargon, but hey, you're supposed to help us. We're a member institution, and all it seems that you've done is taking care of yourself, people who used to be with the ACC and some of their family members potentially, but there's really no help for us member schools. So we're joining Florida State. We could care less about how to win friends and influence people when it comes to this alignment. So Clemson is very happy that the Clemson fans are very happy that we're finally going after them with some tenacity and following in the steps of Florida State, as I've said, going nuclear on the ACC. So yes, it is nice to finally see us, be a man, stand up and say, "Hey, yeah, we signed the contract, but you're supposed to hold up your end of the deal."
Yeah. Clemson got another big win here recently in the fact that they're going to get access to that ESPN ACC agreement. Now, it does have to stay confidential, but it is unredacted. And to me, it kind of feels like Clemson's going to be fighting with both arms now, not having one hand tied behind their back, not necessarily noting what they were fighting against. How big of a win is that for Clemson? Because I view it as pretty massive.
Yeah, I mean, what if you wanted to see the contract, you had to request to see the contract, and basically they sat there and stared at you and made sure that you didn't write anything down or take a picture, you know. And then Florida State, thank God for Florida State exposing so much so far about the ACC, so it makes every member school who is worth their weight in salt should say, "We want to see the contract. We want to see it now. And if that means going to court, we'll do it." But for Clemson, this was a big deal. Of course, every time there's a lawsuit in a different state, the ACC has to go to that state. They have to abide by it. You Florida State fans know that. But this happened in Pickens County, South Carolina, which is where Clemson is located. And so we got that win this past week. And that is massive for us because how can we challenge something to the fullest that we really don't know exactly what we're challenging as a whole? I mean, I think that any judge who just is interested in justice in general would want both sides to be able to see the complete contract. But that was big for us. It gives us a fighting chance. And as I've said on my show several times, look, I like that Clemson waited and chose a different angle from Florida State because all we have to have is one breach. Yeah. One school breaches, everybody is in. So this was big for us, but it could also be very big for Florida State.
Looking at conference realignment, maybe as a big picture, not necessarily lawsuit focused, where do you think the best landing spot for the Tigers is?
I was so confident of where we should be initially, the SEC. You know, Georgia is an hour and 20 minutes from the Clemson campus. And when I say Georgia, I'm not talking about the state of Georgia. I'm talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. They're an hour and 20 minutes from us. We're roughly 3.5 hours from Knoxville, Tennessee. It makes sense. But the more and more I think about it, and the more that that I've heard rumblings from Columbia that the University of South Carolina doesn't want us in, and the whole TV market deal. I think that it would be hilarious for Clemson and Florida State to help the Big Ten plant a flag in Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner's backyard, and say, hey, Greg, we have a team, talking about the Big Ten, we have a team from sea to shining sea. The only place we don't have it right now is in the South. And Southern football is religion for anyone who's paying attention. So I think that would be fantastic. I was completely and totally turned off to the idea of going to the Big 12. But I am now to the point that I want nothing to do with the ACC. And if the Big 12 would take us, have at it.
I think the Big 12 would still be tough for me at this point, but I do think that anything's better than the ACC, like you said. I've always felt, even with like the snub and everything that happened in December, I still think that the SEC feels the most right for Florida State and Clemson. Like, it feels the most natural. You mentioned some of the proximity. Same thing. Like, Florida State's an hour or 2 hours and 15 minutes from Gainesville. They're really close to Auburn. They're very close to Athens as well. And so the Big Ten would feel weird, but at the end of the day, man, just get me off this sinking ship. Where do you think, do most Clemson fans feel like just get us out, or do you think they have a preference? Do they kind of think like you of let's stick it to the SEC, or what do you think that most of the fan base would prefer?
Oh, they prefer the SEC because it's always been kind of a common knowledge that Clemson is an SEC school in the ACC.
Sure.
Of course, when Clemson went on their run, during 16 and 18, beat Alabama like a redheaded stepchild, we were told over and over, well, if you were in the SEC like you should be, this would never happen. Of course, that was funny, and history is what it is. But a lot of Clemson fans want the SEC. They want to be there. They finally want to get this kind of this stigma that, oh, well, if we were in the SEC, we wouldn't do so well. That's at least what our feathered foe from South Carolina tells us. And of course, we go and beat them like redheaded stepchildren and laugh and go on. But I think at this point, more and more fans are warming up to the idea of the Big Ten and really just leaving the ACC, because the ACC looks really bad now. Like, at first, Florida State and then followed by Clemson, we kind of look bad. Like, the people who really don't understand that signing a contract is signing a contract. But as this thing has progressed, the ACC looks like they're holding their member schools hostage. And do you really want to be seen like that? Yeah. So I really don't think so.
How important is it to you or Clemson fans? Thoughts on keeping Florida State and Clemson together? Is that a priority? Do you not really care? You won't offend me, but just thoughts there.
I think the two most dominant football powers in the past 40 years, and yes, I say 40 years. I know that Florida State joined, 1989, somewhere in there. Forgive me, a few years here and there. Yeah, Clemson dominated the ACC in the 80s. Of course, won the national championship in 81. Florida State, they did what they did in the 90s. Clemson started coming on a little more in the early 2000s. But you guys was dominating, of course, winning the national championship with Jimbo and then us taking over. But when you look at ACC football, and of course you guys are circling back around, here you are, it's Clemson and Florida State again. It would be nice for nostalgic purposes to have us all together, go somewhere together, and we could play within that conference, but we could also turn around and play one another and have that rivalry. It would be a lot of fun. I think it would be great, and it would be another way to look at the ACC and go, what were you thinking, man? I mean, it would be one nice jab,
Yeah, for travel partners, for just a little bit of regionality sticking together, and then a pretty natural rival. I would prefer that Florida State and Clemson stay together. At the end of the day, if they want to split us up and that gets us out of here, then that's fine with me too. But I'd like to stay together. Last thing, and then we'll wrap this one up. Do you you mentioned South Carolina not being a big fan? I know that UF is scared to death of Florida State getting into the SEC as well. What do you think they'd be effective in blocking? Do you think the SEC commissioner and the other powers that be would just be like, hey, shut up and get in line? Or could they raise enough of a stink to matter?
I think who we should be appealing to in that matter is ESPN. I think that ESPN can definitely look at Greg Sankey and tell a team that, a good year for them is 7-5, and they think they've won the national championship. We don't care anymore. This is much bigger than you. So I think that this really comes down to ESPN in a lot of cases influencing whether we go, and even y'all go into the SEC. I think that that's really the power of that network, whether we like it or not. And I think the Gamecocks would just have to accept it. I
Yeah.
think that they would be like, "Hey, look, we're putting together a legacy, multi-billion-dollar league that is actually competing with the mini super conference that the Big Ten has created across multiple networks. We're not going to let some team that's not that great in Columbia, South Carolina, keep this from happening. And Florida, I mean, no offense, Florida, but you're a shell of history right now. You're a shell of history. You wear the same jerseys, have the same fight song, play at the same Gainesville Stadium. But at the end of the day, I don't even think your coach is going to be the coach by game 7.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's going to stop this legacy multi-billion-dollar deal.
Brian, where can folks find you? Where can they learn more about the Clemson Tigers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go on YouTube, Clemson Football Live. You'll see me. I say us. I don't know. Do I have multiple personalities? You'll see me there at Clemson Football Live.
Awesome. I appreciate you for joining me, bud.
Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks, bud.